Good day everyone and hello ma'am. My name is Zarina Elefante and I am a member of Group 7. So today we are going to discuss about the research frontiers and methodologies for language and gender. So the introduction of our topic talks about this chapter reviews current studies on language and gender, exploring theories, methods, and new areas for research. So it highlights how language shapes, expresses, and challenges gender in various settings like conversations, online spaces, and workplaces. So it also emphasizes the need for careful ethical research to better understand communication and social interactions. So based on this module, this chapter is currently best about language and gender, about research frontiers. So we will highlight later the language and gender, exploring theories, methods, and new for research frontiers, which is the new areas for research. So the potential research frontiers. So it said here that the field of language and gender is constantly evolving. So driven by societal shifts, technological advancements, and new theoretical insights. It talks about the several exciting research frontiers hold significant promise for future exploration. So, potential research frontiers, in other words or simple words, it talks about the new innovation or new study about language and genders. So, frontiers means it is the new innovation or the study of researchers about their study. So, language and gender in digital spaces. It said here that as more people connect online, there are many new ways to see how gender is shown and expressed through digital communication. So, according to Herring and Stowager in 2014, researchers can only explore how usernames, profiles, and online habits reflect gender. So they can also study how features like anonymity. When we say anonymity, it talks about hidden or unknown self. It is not about your true self or your real self, but it talks about your fake and not so real identity. So they can also study features like different ways of sharing in digital communications like text, sharing images or videos. It also affects gendered communication, including the rise of online gender-based harassment and discrimination. So, the language and gender in digital spaces have so many disadvantages and advantages. So, the advantages of the digital spaces in language and gender talks about how people connect online. Like, you can talk to your loved one and at some reason or some point, this era of digital is very real known in our generation because it helps us to better or easily talk about some people and relationship about language and gender. So next, the example of this is on Instagram, users often pick usernames and profile pictures that show their gender, while on Reddit, where people are anonymous, gendered language and even harassment can happen more easily. So it simply talks about the digital spaces in language and gender. It said here that Instagram often pick usernames and profile pictures that show their gender because it not showed anonymous account, while the Reddit naman, it talks about how people are anonymous and gender language and even harassment can happen more easily. Next one is the intersectionality and language. When we say intersectionality, it talks about the discrimination about race, culture, social class and sexuality, and also our age. But it said here that gender doesn't exist alone. So it connects with other parts of who we are, like our race, culture, social class, sexuality, and age. So according to Buchholz and Hall in 2016, it say that the true or truly understand language and gender, we must look at how all these identities mix and affect the way people use language. So the future studies like the frontiers researchers should explore these connections more closely. So that is the meaning of the intersectionality and language in language gender. So it only highlights here that gender doesn't exist alone. Next example of this was, for instance, women from higher social classes may use formal language, while those from lower classes may use regional dialects, facing different perceptions. Additionally, women of color like Black or Latino women may be judged based on their accents or dialects. So by considering multiple identities such as race, gender, and class, we can better understand how language reflects and shapes these intersecting social factors. So it talks about discrimination, and like Buchholz and Hall says that gender doesn't exist alone. So we can see how gender is very crucial in our generation right now. Another one, language, gender, and power dynamics. When we say power dynamics, it involves how gender imbalances are maintained. So when we say language, gender, and power dynamics, it is the study of how language and power dynamics help us better understand how language or how gender imbalances are maintained. For example, men often interrupt more in mixed gender meetings. So I also noticed this in our classroom, that gender, or should I say men, often interrupt more in mixed gender meetings. So it also happens in political speeches and media frame gender in specific ways, like some of us or our country talks about men is very powerful, like our president right now is also a male, so they are very dominant in our generation. So this subtle cues reinforce gender hierarchies in areas like work. So it said here that gender of men interrupt more not only in meetings or social gatherings, but it also experiences in the field of in work, like in politics and such as education. So as Baxter of 2014 notes, future research could explore these patterns to better understand how language sustains power dynamics. So next, transgender language and identity. When we say transgender identities, it gains visibility. Studying how transgender people use language is becoming increasingly important. So this includes how they express their gender identity, navigate transitions, and challenge traditional language norms. Research could look at language in coming out stories, or how transgender individuals use pronouns and chosen names in different social contexts. So as Kulik 2019 suggests. So these studies will help us understand the role of language in shaping and affirming transgender identities. So I hope there's no discrimination about the LGBTQ program, because it said here that transgender is so powerful when it talks about language and identity, because transgender people use language is becoming increasingly important. So that is why. Next, I think this is the last slide for me. Language, gender, and health communication. So, in our previous topics, language and gender is powerful in every field of academics and job or work. So now we will talk about language, gender, and health communication. So, examining how language influences health experiences for different genders is an important research area. So, gender, I think this includes studying how doctors communicate with male and female patients. So, for instances, doctors, especially on topics like pain management, it also explores how language or how gender is portrayed in public health campaigns or online forums, so affecting how health concerns are discussed. For example, analyzing gendered language in medication ads can reveal how language shapes perceptions of health risks, as Kidzinger 2017 points out. So, the language and gender in health communication plays a vital role in communication, because it shows how men or women will dominate the conversation about public health communication. So that is all about my report. Let's move on to the next reporter.
Hello, so I'm Jess Andaya. So now let's discuss the research framework. A strong research framework is key to studying language and gender. It includes clear research questions, yung naiintindihan ng mga pagbibigyan mo ng questions. Careful data collection. It is the methods must be appropriate for answering the research questions. For example, the survey, interview, and corpus analysis, yung the collection of text like books, news, articles, and social media posts, and an understanding of social context. Importante para sa mga researcher na tignan kung paano nakakaapekto ang paggamit ng salita, kasi minsan may mga salita kasi na okay lang sa ibang lugar pero nakakasakit naman sa iba. This framework helps ensure reliable and meaningful results, offering insights into how language shapes and reflects gender. A strong framework ensures the research and well-structured produce reliable results and offers valuable insights. Ito yung way natin para makakuha tayo ng mga idea through research framework. So now, let's move on theoretical underpinnings. Language and gender research draws on various theories such as social constructionism. Social constructionism argues that gender isn't biologically determined, but it's a product of society norms and expectations. Language is key to this process, creating and reinforcing ideas about what it means to be male or female. For example, using terms like chairman instead of chairperson reflects and perpetuates traditional gender roles, which sees gender as a social creation. Performativity theory, which highlights how language shapes gender, and critical discourse analysis, which looks at how language maintains power dynamics, by Butler in 1990 and Fairclough in 2010. For performativity theory, according to Judith Butler, gender isn't a fixed thing, but something we create through our actions and the way we communicate. It's all about the choices we make. Researchers should clearly define their theoretical approach, as it influences their studies, questions, methods, and findings. Let's talk about a conceptual framework. A conceptual framework defines key concepts and outlines their relationship in a study. For example, in a study of gendered language in online discussions, the researcher might define concepts like assertiveness, supportiveness, and negativity, and hypothesize that these traits vary between genders. A clear framework helps guide the research by focusing on specific measurable constructs, ensuring the study is structured and targeted. So this slides is about how important it is to have a plan for your research. A good plan clearly defines what you're studying and how everything connects. For example, if you're studying how men and women use language differently online, your plan needs to say exactly what you mean by things like assertiveness and negativeness. Research questions and hypotheses. Well-defined research questions guide the investigation. For example, a question could be, how do male and female politicians differ in their use of hedging devices in parliamentary debates? A hypothesis might be, female politicians use hedging devices more frequently than male politicians in parliamentary debates. These questions and hypotheses help focus the study on specific testable relationships. So this slide shows how research questions and hypotheses guide the entire research process. By starting with specific questions like, do female politicians use hedging language more than male politicians? And a testable hypothesis, researchers can focus their data collection and analysis. This ensures the results directly address the initial questions about gender and language use in political debates.
Hello everyone, I am Cinderella Sagid, and let's move on to the operationalization in gender research. Operationalization is a crucial first step in language and gender research where researchers transform abstract concepts into measurable variables. This process ensures scientific rigor through precise measurement, reproducibility of research by other scholars, systematic data collection across different contexts. Example here is when studying assertiveness in gendered speech, research might operationalize this concept by counting direct commands, measuring frequency of declarative statements, tracking interruption patterns, and analyzing use of hedging language. Research methodologies in language and gender involve a mix of qualitative and quantitative approach. The first one is discourse analysis. This qualitative method examines language in its social context, focusing on patterns of meaning and power. For example, conversation analysis could explore how gender affects turn-taking and topic initiation in mixed-gender conversation. This approach examines language in its social context, focusing on power dynamic in conversation, meaning construction between speakers, contextual factor affecting language use. The research application, analyzing turn-taking pattern in mixed-gender meetings, examining topics initiation and maintenance in conversations, investigating how gender identities are constructed through narrative, studying how interruption patterns reflect social hierarchies. The second one is corpus linguistic, which is the quantitative. This data-driven approach uses large language datasets to identify statistical patterns in language use, compare frequency distribution of linguistic features, trace language change across time periods. The research application is comparing words, choice, and frequency between texts written by different genders, analyzing analyzing syntactic structure in large samples of speech, tracking gender language change over time in media, and the last one is identifying collocations, word commonly appearing together in gender discourse.
So, ethnographic research. This qualitative method involves observing and understanding language practices within a specific community. An ethnographer might study how male and female communicate in a workplace and negotiate gender roles and through daily interaction. So, ethnographic research description. This is a qualitative method that involved observing and understanding language practices with a specific community. So, purpose it allows researchers, ethnographers to explore how gender roles are communicated and negotiated in natural settings like workplaces through daily language use. Example is studying how male and female colleagues interact in a professional settings. Next slide is experimental methods. These methods manipulate variables to test their effect on language outcomes. For example, researchers might examine how different wording in jump ads influences perception or male and female candidates. So, for experimental methods is description is these methods manipulate variables to test their effect on language-related outcomes. Purpose is to discover causal relationship by controlling condition and observing responses. Example, investigating how wording in job advertisement can influence perception or male versus female candidates. So, the third one is survey and questionnaire. These tools collect data on attitudes and experience related to gendered language. They can provide insight into perception of stereotypes. So, the third one is survey and questionnaires. These tools collect data on attitudes and experience related to gendered language. They can provide insight into perception of stereotypes of experiences of gender-based language discrimination. So, survey and questionnaire is description. These tools are used to collect data on attitudes and personal experiences with gender language. So, purpose is to gather large-scale, often quantitative insight into public opinion, stereotypes or experiences with the gender-based language discrimination. Example, asking people about their experience or perception regarding sex language in media or the workplace. The last one is mixed method research. Mixed method research combining both qualitative and quantitative approaches So, the last one is mixed method research. So, mixed method research combining both qualitative and qualitative. So, and next slide is next. So, the last one is mixed method research combining both qualitative and quantitative approaches offers fuller understanding of language and gender. For example, a study could combine corpus analysis, online discussion with interview to explore both broad patterns and individual experience of gendered language use. So, example, mixed method research involves using both qualitative and quantitative approaches to provide a more comprehensive understanding of how language gender interact. So, qualitative data might include interviews, observation, or ethnographic notes to explore individual experiences and deeper meaning. So, sa quantitative data naman is involve survey, statistical analysis, or corpus studies to identify broad patterns or trends. Example from the slide is a research project might analyze corpus data Large collection or text from online discussion as general patterns and gendered language use, and conduct interviews with individuals to explore their personal experience with the language. Purpose niya is by combining these two approaches, researchers can validate findings, triangulate data, and gain insight that neither method could provide.
Research ethics in language and gender is crucial for protecting participants' rights and well-being. The first one is informed consent. Participants must fully understand the research purpose, procedures, and risks before agreeing to participate. Sabi rito is dapat naiintindihan nila yung research purpose mo, then yung procedures to agree and to participate. Para alam nila kung ano yung kanilang gagawin. Then, informed consent should be voluntary and continuous, particularly when researching sensitive areas like online communities. Kaya need ng informed consent before ka mag-conduct ng research purpose mo. Kaya need talaga ng informed consent. The second one is privacy and confidentiality. Ano nga ba ang privacy and confidentiality? Researchers must safeguard participant privacy and keep data confidential. Sabi rito, yung mga research participants dapat yung mga privacy and data confidential nila is wag mo lang dapat alamin or kunin. Kumbaga this is especially important when studying sensitive topics like gender identity or discrimination. Researcher must respect participant privacy by not collecting or disclosing information that is not relevant to the study. This include protecting their physical space, personal relationship, and private information. Ito ay kanilang private information, kumbaga is personal information to them. The obligation to protect sensitive information from unauthorized disclosure. Then researchers must keep participant data confidential, meaning they should not share it with anyone outside the research team without participant consent.
I am Kate Kimber Labasan, reporter of Group 7. Avoiding harm. Research should minimize potential harm to participate, including emotional distress. For example, research on gendered language in harassment cases must be conducted with care to avoid harm. This is emphasized the ethical principle of minimizing harm in research. It highlights the importance of protecting participants from potential physical and especially emotional distress. The example of research on gendered language in harassment cases illustrates the need for careful consideration to prevent causing further harm to those involved. Representation and voice. Researchers should ensure diverse gender identities and experiences are included and accurately represented, actively seeking out marginalized perspectives. This stresses the importance of inclusive representation in research. Researchers should actively include and accurately portray diverse gender identities and experiences, making a special effort to seek out and represent the views of marginalized groups. Reflexivity. Researchers must critically examine their own biases and how their identity might influence the research process. Berger, 2015. This is emphasized reflexivity in research. Researchers must critically examine their own biases and how their personal identities might influence the research process to ensure objectivity and avoid skewed result. Other aspects of language and gender research. cross-cultural and cross-linguistic comparisons. Studying how language and gender interest across different cultures can reveal universal and cultural specific patterns in gendered communication. Lack of 2022. For example, comparing how politeness is gendered in different language. This advocates for cross-cultural and cross-linguistic comparison in research on gender and language. By studying how language and gender intersect across different cultures, research can identify both universal and cultural specific patterns in gendered communication.
Another aspect of language and gender research is language and gender in educational settings. It is investigating how languages in classroom and textbook reinforces gender roles can promote gender equity in education, according to Cameron 2018. So as Cameron suggests, examines the language used in classrooms and textbook is a powerful step toward gender equity by revealing and challenging embedded gender norms. Educators can create learning environment that validate all gender equally and promote fairer opportunities for everyone. Like for example, in textbook, they use male pronouns like he, and it referred to roles with gender terms like policeman or businessman, which reinforces the idea that the men are the standard and certain jobs are male dominated. So how it reinforces gender roles. So the use of language suggests that men are more important or typical in professionals or public roles, while women are left out the limited roles. So how to promote gender equity? So, to promote gender equity is use gender-inclusive language like neutral job titles like policeman instead policeman, and also use gender pronouns like the or altering to he or she. So, by using this, it helps all students feel included and see a wider range of possibilities for themselves. Next is applied language and gender research. So this area applies research to real-world issues such as creating gender-inclusive language guidelines and addressing gender-based discrimination. So this uses linguistic insights to tackle real-world gender issues. Like for example, it helps create a gender-inclusive language guidelines like using they as singular pronoun or replacing chairman with chairperson. So this also address performance viewers or reviews, and developing tools will reduce these biases in workplace and media. The last research is the historical perspectives on language and gender. This explores how gendered language has evolved over time, offers insights into how past ideologies influence modern language. The research examines how language used to reflect gender roles like the dominance of male-centered terms like mankind, generic to he, and how this shifted over time. Like for example, in feminist movements in 1970s, it is about sexist language leading to more inclusive terms like firefighter instead of fireman. So this evolution reveals how past gendered ideologies still shapes today's language norms and highlights ongoing efforts to make language more equitable. So for the conclusion of the report is language and gender research helps us to understand how languages shapes and challenges gender by looking at different factors, using strong methods, and following ethical guidelines. Researchers helps create a fairer and more inclusive view for promoting social justice and better communication.